go from there. With that, our moderator tonight is Lewis Combs. Lewis is an attorney in Charlottesville. He was a prosecutor for many years, and he went to the dark side shortly after we moved up here. And he is my husband. So with that, Lewis, would you like to come up here? You can introduce yourself further. Have a great time and show us who you are.
I was going to say we are related by marriage, so Karen is my better half, and I'm glad to see you all out here today. It's going to be a simple process. So we are going to do the opening introductions and then go through the questions. We have the questions available. They will be handed to me. I will read the question, and then we will go in order. And then once we've gone through that order, then we will mix that order up. So each candidate will be able to go number one, number two, and number three in random order. All right. So with that, Amy Lawford, this is the introduction stage. If you will introduce yourself and tell the audience what you'd like them to know.
Can you hear me? Is that on?
Yes.
Thank you first to all of you for coming out tonight. I really appreciate you guys taking the time, and I want to say a special thanks to the Albemarle County Democrats and the City Democrats for sponsoring this, especially Nancy Damon and Karen. As a former chair too, I know how hard it is to herd Democrats, and I appreciate your leadership. Again, my name is Amy Lawford. I am running for House of Delegate 55. I grew up on the lesson of hard work. I'm from a dairy farm. I'm one of 8 children, and I'm very used to a loud dinner table where no one listens. But I'm first generation college graduate, and I worked my way through college, flipping burgers at Wendy's, renting cars at Avis, and packing fish in Alaska. I have my degree in geology. I eventually went into the Peace Corps, and I was stationed at an elementary school where I became inspired to become a teacher. So I came back, I got my master's in education, and I was a middle school math and science teacher. Everything changed when our second child was born with major medical issues. And I was a breadwinner. I had to quit work so that I could take care of our son. And I became well aware of the insurance companies and Big Pharma. I decided to become a parent representative for Commission on Children and Families with Madison. I was experiencing firsthand the holes in our policies and systems when it comes to helping families. And being at that table for the commission really highlighted all of, the groups that were trying to help families. And the lesson from my parents came back again, you have to do the hard work. I eventually became chair of the Charlottesville School Board. I ran for school board, and we did a lot of great things. But while I was advocating in Richmond, I realized how few women were elected to state office. So I decided to start a women's group called Virginia's List. It's a PAC that supports Democratic pro-choice women running for office. And for the past 8 years, we've helped every Democratic woman get elected. And I'm running again now because we have more work to do. Now more than ever, it's important that we stand up for women's rights and stand against Governor Youngkin's extreme anti-choice agenda. We need to end gun violence in our community and across the Commonwealth. And as a teacher, I know how much work we have to do around education, especially as our governor continues to attack our public schools and teachers. And we need to support our farmers who are on the front lines of climate change and extreme weather events. Again, I want to say thank you for being here today, and I look forward to your questions this evening. Thank you.
Next, we will have speaking Kellen Squire, and I would point out that the 55th, these 2 candidates are with the 55th, the 54th are the 3 candidates down on that end. Just make sure that, that we're not confused. So, Mr. Squire.
Well, thank you, Lewis. Good evening, folks. Thanks for coming out. I really appreciate it. Again, my name is Kellen Squire. I'm an emergency department nurse here in Albemarle County and have been for the last 12 years. Before that, I worked in pediatric acute and intensive care at the University of Virginia Children's Hospital. I spent 3 years as an Albemarle County public school nurse. I live in rural Albemarle County with my wife, who is also an emergency department nurse, and our 3 kids, who are products of the Albemarle County Public School District. In 2017, I ran for the Virginia House of Delegates against the most entrenched incumbent in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and what at the time was the most gerrymandered district in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And we came up a little shorter than I would have preferred, but the hard work that we did, and not just us, but everybody in Albemarle and Fluvanna and Rockingham and Greene County and everyone in the Central Virginia area did, let us hit what my friend Tom Perello has called the sacrifice fly of 2017. And we caused the Virginia Republican Party to spend so much time and resources fighting us off, and let us put our other runs on the board across the Commonwealth of Virginia, and let us pass Medicaid expansion in 2018 by a single vote. But you know, coming up from that, I knew that there was more work to be done, and especially after the last 3 years of fighting the pandemic in the ER, after seeing the worst year I've seen than the rest of my career combined for gun violence impacting our community, about the assault on our rights, and that's reproductive rights, abortion rights, trans rights, and even civil rights. And then after being in the emergency department, treating victims of the Unite the Right attack in 2017, I knew there was so much more work to be done. And in particular, we have a legislature in Richmond that does not look like the Commonwealth of Virginia. It just doesn't. To run for office in the Commonwealth of Virginia, you generally have to be one of 3 things. You have to be independently wealthy, you have to have deep political connections, or you have to have a job that lets you make $500 an hour so you can afford to work and run for office. And we have few to no people in the General Assembly building right now that don't look like one of those 3 things. And that has to change. That has to change because we need a legislature that looks like Virginia. We need people who are making change at a community level. We need people there who have struggled, that have had to quit their job because they couldn't afford daycare, who see what happens when somebody has to cut their pills into 8s because their rent went up and they can't afford it. People that have seen kids have to wait days or weeks in an emergency department room for an inpatient psychiatric admission. The difference between what they want to accomplish in Richmond and what actually goes on the ground in our community. And that's why I stood up to run, is to go to Richmond and be a voice to say, this is what you're doing and this is what's happening, to make sure that we can fix these systemic problems once and for all.
Thank you. Now we have candidates from the 54th District. Dave Norris, introduce yourself.
Good evening, thank you for having me. My name is Dave Norris, and I've been living here in Charlottesville and been very active in the community, making that community level change, as Kevin said, for almost 30 years now. From the years of 2006 to 2014, I had the great honor and privilege of serving on the Charlottesville City Council, and from 2008 to 2012, served as mayor of this community. We have a lot of challenges here in Charlottesville and Albemarle and in our Commonwealth as a whole. Too many of our neighbors are mired in poverty. Too many of the people who do the hard work of making this community function can't afford to live here. We have an assault on reproductive freedom that is intensifying by the day across the country and here in the Commonwealth. The trans community is under attack. Our mental health system in Virginia is broken. Gun violence has been plaguing our community. I could go on. A lot of challenges that we're encountering. We need to elect delegates and state senators to the General Assembly who have what it takes to take on these big challenges and have a track record of championing bold progressive change. And I am putting myself forward as one of those candidates. I cut my political teeth in Charlottesville working on the issue of living wage for workers, specifically at the University of Virginia. That movement took many years. Finally, with the inauguration of President Jim Ryan, the university agreed after many years to pay a living wage, although it needs to go up from where it is now. In 2004, in the winter of 2004, a young man froze to death in the streets of Charlottesville. And a lot of us asked ourselves, how is it that in a community of such wealth and such resources do people end up sleeping out on the streets and on park benches, and unfortunately one of them succumbed to the cold? And so I worked with a large group of ministers and lay leaders from congregations all over this city and county to create what is now known as PACHM. And over the last number of years, PACHM's been able to shelter thousands of individuals, provide thousands of nights to shelter to many individuals in our community who otherwise would be out in the cold. When I ran for city council, the city at the time was spending 3 to 4 times as much money every year maintaining our public golf courses as it was building affordable housing. I worked very hard for a number of years to change that and created an affordable housing fund in the city budget, which has now helped to build or renovate or preserve over 2,000 units of affordable housing here in our community. I chaired the inaugural Citizens Committee on Environmental Sustainability, which led to the first climate action planning efforts here in the city of Charlottesville. I could go on. I've taken on the big challenges. I have a track record of bringing people together to get good things done. That's the same mentality that I would bring to Richmond as your delegate, somebody who's not going to only say the right things when it comes to making bold progressive change, but somebody who has a track record and a willingness to fight every day for bold progressive change for this community. Please visit my website, votefordave.org. Thank you.
Our next candidate is Bellamy Brown.
Hi, my
It won't stop. It won't stop. Well, I tried that and it didn't work. Carry on.
Mr. Brown.
Sure. Hi, my name is Bellamy Brown. I believe that I am the only candidate on this stage who was born and raised here, gone through the Charlottesville public school system, Venable, walked with youth in CHS. I also have a long history of family service to our community, dating back to pre-Civil War, which is how we have the First Baptist Church on Main right now. In addition, on the other side of my family, we have a church on 12th and Wasser that was instrumental in the African American community in terms of uplifting their community members during the 40s, 50s, and 60s. West Haven being one of those facilities that my grandfather built or helped build. We grew up in poverty. We didn't have means to look at college or secondary education. High school, typically in the African American community, was the highest that we could go. And I sat at home or in my grandmother's house one day with a hot box fan, and was like, I can't do this, so I have to create a different alternative. I played soccer with kids from soccer, and a lot of their parents were lawyers, and I said, well, that's my ticket out. And so up until the point when my dad moved us out of here after my sophomore year of school, I was actually failing, and so that would have been an option. He moved us to Fairfax County, and then things got turned around. They got turned around enough to where I continued to serve in the Marine Corps, to get college money, went to James Madison University, studied finance and political science, subsequently obtained a master's, an MBA in finance and a master's in accounting with additional coursework in public policy. I've been in DC for I guess about 20 years or so when August 2017 happened. It was never my intention, or it wasn't my intention to come back to Charlottesville until later on when I'd made money and was looking to retire. However, after 2017, given that this is my hometown, I felt that I had the pedigree to be able to serve on council, and so I came back and I ran for council. I didn't end up getting there, but subsequently served on the Police Oversight Board, which is where we ended up getting a strong ordinance in 2021. We got operating procedures in 2022, and a full board with capital in 2023. That's the effort, or part of the effort that I've done here locally for our community. I'm running to provide, to continue that criminal justice reform space, also in the public safety space, to strengthen women's rights, because obviously, as everyone has said, there is an attack on that from the governor's mansion, in addition to the education being made basically a minefield for our teachers and students.
Next up is Katrina Collison, if you would introduce yourself.
So, I'm Katrina. Is mine on? Hello? I need my time restarted because I'm down to the second here when I was timing. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for being here and taking time out of your day to learn more about the candidates. I'm Katrina Collison. I'm going to use my limited time because we are all Democrats here. I agree with most of what is being said, pretty much all of what's being said. I'm going to take my limited time to share a little bit about who I am and what's motivating me. Politics is really personal for me. Both of my parents dropped out of high school, which they always tease me and say, are you telling literally everyone you meet that we dropped out of high school? And the answer is yes, I'm literally telling roomfuls of strangers that they dropped out. But I would like to add the caveat that it's not so much that they dropped out, they weren't welcome at school. They were an interracial teenage couple, and my mom became pregnant, and a pregnant female was not welcome at school. And it was 80s Virginia, and I'm sure you can imagine, as a Black male, my dad was not welcome in that circumstance. So they left, and we struggled for many years as a family with limited opportunities. 5th grade stands out to me as a very difficult year for my family. We were on food stamps. We were food insecure, depending on what time of the month it was. We used WIC for my infant brother. My mom had 2 jobs. She was cleaning houses, worked at a gas station. If I didn't catch the bus to school, I didn't go to school. And so I had to go to truancy court that year. I had the Department of Social Services involved in my life. That's what's motivated me to represent the Department of Social Services for the city. I don't like to dwell on that year. What I do like to say is that the investments that people made into my family, and there were many investments into my family, from government services, government programs, from my teachers that served me, they all paid off. I ended up going to Yale. I went to UVA Law, where I focused on child advocacy. I joined Teach for America and became a teacher. And I truly believe in my core that investments in people pay off and they're worthwhile. And I have dedicated myself to living that. I have dedicated my entire career to public service. I am chair of the Albemarle County School Board. I am deputy city attorney for Charlottesville, representing a variety of departments. And I think in our current political climate, which we've heard about, I've proven that I can do effective, progressive leadership on issues that matter. I've been vice chair of the school board during the pandemic, and you know that school boards have become cultural and political battlegrounds, and I've still managed to pass the first of the state anti-racism policy, a climate action plan. I've been able to pass a living wage for our lowest paid workers who we don't hear from as much. I've been able to, that's not my cue though, right? No. We passed a transgender policy before it was required. And I've been doing that in a climate that is different nowadays. And I just believe to my core that right now what we need in Richmond are more people that can speak to these issues passionately, personally, and effectively so that we can have a brighter future for women, for children like myself, and for our community.
Candidates, your Democratic candidates for the 54th and 55th. Let's give them another round. So this part of the forum will be where a question is asked, it will be asked, and all will answer. We're going to reverse order and start with Katrina. The answer will be 2 minutes in time. So the first question is, if elected to the House of Delegates, what would be your 3 main priorities, Katrina?
Yes, I swear the lights are messing with me here. So number 1, I just have to say it, codifying and protecting women's access to abortion. Number 2, it's personal to me, but providing adequate funding and support for public education, because I think it is a key to our democracy and what our future looks like, to give children opportunities. Sorry, I messed up the clapping. And then the third one is where it becomes the hardest for me, because I do believe in a variety of wraparound supports that we need to continue to invest in to improve the lives of people in our community. But I do want to take this space to say, taking care of our planet is vital for protecting what we need in the long term. So I would say that, although it does pain me to some extent, because I also know that there's Band-Aid issues, there's immediate issues that we need to focus on to improve our everyday life. But I want to acknowledge that climate change is up there for me.
Sure, as I briefly. As I briefly mentioned earlier, so public safety within that criminal justice reform, As I mentioned earlier, working with our oversight board, when the General Assembly provided the ordinance to allow localities to operate these boards in 2021, there weren't many that were in operation. And what we've done here locally is get it in operation and set the standards for investigatory power and have subpoena power within the Commonwealth. We're recognized across the board in the Commonwealth for that leadership. We want to continue that moving forward. That's something that the governor's mentioned and also the Attorney General would like to see shut down. We found that there is value on both sides, whether you like the police or you don't like the police, in having those oversight boards available. The other is women's rights. Again, I come from a long history of folk who have served in government, in public policy, who have advocated for women's rights and suffrage across the board, and they want to continue that. Again, there's obviously assaults, and we don't need to have to say that over and over again on a lot of democratic issues, and also education. That comes through the public school funding, that also comes through things like collective bargaining and supporting our teachers and our students, which I believe strongly in, again, as a product of public schools here at the 54th District.
Sure. So I think the Democratic Party historically is strongest when it has allied itself with the interests of the working class. And if you look at the working class, you talk to working people in Charlottesville, I think across the board, they'll tell you that the biggest challenge they face right now is the cost of living and the cost of housing specifically. It's going through the roof and it's pricing a lot of people out. A lot of people have been gentrified out of our community, they've been priced out of our community, and that's to our detriment. So affordable housing has been the cause of my lifetime, and I will continue to be an advocate and a champion for affordable housing. I have a detailed platform I've released, and you can find it on my website about how we can fill there's a gap right now in the state of Virginia, 200,000 units we need of affordable housing across the state. I have a plan to fill that gap. If you look on my website, votefordave.org, you will see that plan. The mental health system in Virginia, as I said before, is broken. There have been some, I think, noble attempts in recent years to try to do a better job of helping people once they've fallen into mental health crisis, but we don't do nearly enough to prevent people from falling into crisis in the first place. I have released a detailed plan, a prevention-oriented, community-based mental health resource plan on my website that talks about how we can fix that. And third, I agree with many of the panelists, or all the panelists up here. We have to stand strong for reproductive freedom, and it's not enough to say we're pro-choice. We have to go on the offensive. Right now, we're on the defensive. We have to go on the offensive, and I'll be that kind of champion of the league.
That completes the candidates from the 54th, starting on the 55th, Mr. Squire.
Well, as an emergency department nurse, I've obviously got a big healthcare bias, and because in the emergency department, we're the last line of defense for the community safety. What doesn't get fixed in other places come to us, and if we don't fix it, nobody else will. And healthcare sees the intersection of everything. If I sort of alluded to in my opening statement, I mean, you got to choose between your rent going up and your prescription medicine, or we don't have the mental health resources for kids in school, so they end up in my emergency department in crisis. All of these things, if you don't have a house, you're at risk for a lot of medical problems. And so if we can focus, like I said, on a healthcare level and addressing those things before they become crises, we solve a lot of things on a continuum. And I'm gonna say what everybody else is up here. The unprecedented attack on our rights, we have to stand up for those here in Virginia. Again, whether we're talking reproductive rights, abortion rights, trans rights, or civil rights, understand that right now Virginia is the last bastion for abortion access in the entire South. And that is at risk right now from a governor who said he'll spend however much money it'll take to flip the House of Delegates and the state Senate this year. I obviously have to be a little circumspect about what I say, but I've already seen people come from other states to Virginia to access life-saving abortion care, right? It's just insane and unacceptable, and we have to take that fight back against it. We can't just protect our communities, because what happens in other states will come home here. And to follow that up, finalize, we need to protect our democracy. Because again, the governor thinks that he can buy the elections this year because we don't have any campaign finance laws in Virginia to speak of. So he'll spend as much money as it takes, $10 million, $100 million to try and buy that. So we need to make sure that can never happen again. We need to uphold our democracy not just for us, not just for the people on the stage and you in the audience, but our kids and generations to come after us.
Definitely the number one thing we need to do is protect women's right to choose. This is an offense on our privacy and our health care, and the government has no business being in that room with us. Thank you. That would be number one. Number two, I agree, public education. I am a product of public education. I was part of the Head Start program, all these programs. And I know an investment in our children is an investment in our future, and especially with the kind of issues we're trying to solve. We need our children to be the people that can figure these things out. And the other thing I would say, we absolutely have to work on climate crisis. You know, when I think of how we lived on the farm, you know, we were so susceptible to every weather condition. And if we just had our spring start 2 months early. And what have we noticed? How much colder it is right now, right? Once we have a frost, forget about all those crops. You know, we need to take it seriously, and we need to work with farmers. We should not demonize them. They are part of the solution, and those would be my top 3 issues.
All right, the next question will be in criminal justice. I would say we're going to start it back. Amy, you'll be first. Rowan, you'll be second. Then on the 54th, we'll go with Mr. Brown, Mr. Norris. This time. So the question is, currently possession of Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 drugs in Virginia is a felony offense, even for residue. What would be your stance of changing the penalty for simple possession to a misdemeanor? Ms. Long.
I think there's so much going on in this area because during the Northam administration, of course, was, you know, decriminalized. But with the Youngkin administration, we're seeing a lot of these things roll back. We know that this affects mostly, more predominantly in minority communities. One of these, prosecutions can ruin families. So I think we have to be, and we also know that many other states have legalized it. And, so I think we need to start being realistic about what is the future of this and understand that this has disproportionately affected our minority community, and that can't be ignored. And and I feel like part of our criminal justice problem is that we're totally about prosecution and, instead of rehabilitation. These are members of our community. They are coming back to us. We need to work with them to have a brighter future, and that should be our focus. Thank you.
Mr. Squire.
Well, I mean, we shouldn't even be talking about a misdemeanor at all. Maybe we should decriminalize all of this stuff. But at 12 years in the emergency department, I can tell you that almost every time that I've been assaulted, almost every time I've been spit on or hit, or one of my nurses sexually assaulted has been somebody who's been drunk, right? The worst that I've seen I've had somebody come in and you put them in a quiet space and give them some crackers to eat, right? If they come in, they've had one too many, they had half of the cupcake and they're like, if nothing happened, they had the other half, right? So those aren't the people that are having the problems. And we cannot incarcerate our way out of the opioid crisis. We can't incarcerate our way out of any of the drug crisis. It just doesn't work. All it does is make things worse for not just the victims of these things, but the people fighting it on the front lines. We need to decriminalize almost if not all recreational drugs. We need to make sure people can access rehab programs and the things they need to do to be able to move on now. We need to treat it as a medical problem, not a criminal problem. And if we spent, half or a fraction of the money we do locking those people up on rehab programs, on primary health care options, and all of these things, we'd have a better society, we'd have people out of jail, and a healthier community.
Thank you. We'll start the 54th district with Mr. Burke.
Sure. So before I came back home in 2018, in 2017, I was working for Bank of America with another African American male. We had just finished up the day, walked outside, broad daylight, standing in suits, talking to each other, and we looked suspicious to some police officers coming by. They happened to have a substation behind them where we were working, and there was a street watch. So out of that, I attended law school, told my buddy, I was like, don't say anything, like, fine. Out of that incident, they ended up charging with possession. And so I'm like, what are you talking about? Apparently this is like doing simple possession is something that officers would do throughout the Commonwealth, and the state police have record of this. So I spent the better part of a year fighting that, and I got the family discount rate of $4,000 from an attorney, a friend who's an attorney, when it's normally $8,000. Throughout that experience, I saw just how easy it is for us to, lose our rights one way or the other. And that's what prompted me to come back and serve on the Police Oversight Board. Obviously, as Ms. Lawford has stated, a lot of these laws are blocking up African, brown, and black folk, and this extends from the Nixon administration, where John Ehrlichman, as domestic policy advisor, stated plainly, we're doing this so that we can lock up Americans, and all of that needs to be reversed.
Mr. Norris.
I agree. The war on drugs has been a failure. We have about 5% of the world's population, yet over 20% of the world's inmates. We're incarcerating way too many of our neighbors, and a lot of that dates back to exactly what Bellamy just talked about, which was the war on drugs and mass incarceration. They're absolutely linked. I have a very close friend here in Charlottesville whose home was raided about 3 in the morning. This is about 15, 20 years ago now, by a SWAT team on suspicion that her young adult son was dealing marijuana out of the home. Her teenage daughter was woken up at 3 in the morning in her bed with a gun pointed at her head from the Jane Task Force. This young man, they found no marijuana in the home. They did find a small scale, and they found some stems. And they told him if he didn't report his dealer above him, they were going to send him away. He said, I can't do that. That's putting my safety at risk, putting my family's safety at risk. They sent him to state prison for 10 years. 10 years, this young man, the prime of his life. When I got elected to city council, I worked hard to try and change the inequitable enforcement of our laws, specifically around marijuana. You never see UVA students being arrested and their lives destroyed for smoking a joint. We routinely saw police use marijuana as a gateway, if you will, towards prosecuting and pursuing African Americans. And we got some legislation introduced that would have essentially decriminalized marijuana in the city of Charlottesville. Unfortunately, it did not succeed, but that cause, I think, was important. We also asked and pled for the General Assembly to take action on a statewide basis. Thankfully, they eventually did. I am the candidate in this race who has been endorsed by the Virginia Hemp Coalition, which has been on the front lines of fighting not only for legalization of hemp, but also cannabis here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Out of, I think, appreciation for the work that I've done and the work that I will continue to do to improve our cannabis and hemp laws here in Virginia.
Ms. Collins.
Yeah, so I do not disagree with my opponents. I would certainly echo the UVA divide, racial divide that I think happens with drug use. When I was a child growing up the way that I did, you did not use drugs or you were putting your whole future online. And I'm telling you, it was a different story when I got to Yale. I was shocked. These kids were coming out of boarding school doing all kinds of drugs and feeling like they were repercussion free. And I realized then that this is nothing about this is fair. The drug war, the way that we handle criminal prosecutions, how I would, to add to what they said, I would say that I would love to see an elimination of prosecutorial discretion in how we process these crimes. Jim Hingley has a different track record than a prosecutor out in rural counties, so I would love to address that disparity of what the results you get based on where you're arrested in the Commonwealth. I would like to put a little plug in for when we start seeing profits from the sale of marijuana. I would love to make sure that the communities that have been disproportionately affected by the war on drugs get to profit from the drug sale. Because, yeah, I can tell you when I was working for the city, we were first anticipating, the city attorney's office, and we were first anticipating the wall coming through, I was getting calls from business owners asking specific questions about how they could get that license. There were very few that were going to be issued, and I do not think it was the communities that probably had been impacted. And so I would just love to see that happen. And I would love to see the drug money spent on schools, because we need to fund our schools, and people are always like, where are you gonna get the money from? Well, I see money there. I would love to see it be spent on schools where we need them. And the last little plug I will say, because I work with abused and neglected children a lot, and many times we're like, that's really hard work, how are you doing it? And I say usually it is not physical abuse that we are witnessing, it is parents who are struggling with substance abuse or mental illness and they cannot get the care that they need. And so although I do not lump marijuana use and automatically a substance use, we need more treatment.
Thank you. So the next question deals with criminal justice, but also I would call it community safety. And this time the order will be Mr. Norris, Mr. Carlson, Mr. Brown, and so the question is, what can be done about guns and crime, violent crime, in Charlottesville, and more so in the Commonwealth of Virginia?
Sure. We actually just had this conversation about 2 days ago. There's a lot we can and should be doing to address the issue of gun violence here in our community. I think you're going to hear some of the same ideas here, but a lot of it starts with investing in better opportunities for young people. Mr. Brown and I attended a gun violence forum recently where some young people in the community said, you know, we don't have positive role models, we don't have positive activities, we don't have enough things that are going to move our peers in the right direction. So what do you expect is going to happen? So too often kids end up going in the wrong direction. So we have to reinvest in our young people, provide better opportunities, better role models. That's where a lot of this starts. But on the state level, we have to take on the gun lobby. There's no way around that. The gun lobby and gun hobbyists, their rights are much more important now than the rights of our children to live in safety and our families to live in safety, and that's wrong. We have to turn that around. My son, twice this year, a 7th grader at Buford Middle School, has had to cower on the floor of his classroom because there was an active shooter threat, and it wasn't a drill. They actually thought there was an active shooter in the building, and that is traumatizing for him and his peers and his teachers to have to experience that twice in the span of one school year. We have to change the tone in Richmond. We have to change the tone nationally and say the rights of our children far exceed the rights of gun hobbyists and the profits of the gun industry. So we have to take that on. Last, but certainly not least, there is a component of this which does relate to mental health. And so I have a detailed mental health reform proposal which looks at prevention, which looks at community-based mental health strategies, which is going to help get out ahead of some of this violence and help support organizations like the Buck Squad and others that are trying to intervene and break the cycle of violence in our communities.
Thank you. Ms. Collison?
Yes, so we need to do more about our guns. And for me, the bottom line is, if you are going to own a gun, then you need to be responsible for it. Bottom line, you need to store it and make sure that kids do not have access to it. You need to put a lock on it so that if it is not you cannot shoot it. Of the 5, it's been a while since I've done it, maybe might have been a shooting since I talked to the police chief. Of the 5 most recent shootings, all of them involve stolen guns. Stolen guns are what is used in the commission of the crime, and most of them are stolen out of cars. Legislation was introduced this session to make it I think just a misdemeanor to have your gun in your car and keep your car unlocked, and that did not pass. And I think that is silly. And beyond that, it's scary. And especially because there's polling to support that the majority of Virginians agree. That's reasonable, common sense gun law, and we should pass it. I will say the moms demand action. I'm going to use my time to put in a plug for them. They have a meeting tomorrow. If you have not been to one of their meetings, it is inspiring, the work that they do. I feel like you're right in my line of sight, so I'm like talking to you directly. So if I'm making you uncomfortable, I'm sorry. They have a meeting. They will let you know that although there's definitely gun violence happening in our community, that we need to pass these laws to get around, the most dangerous thing a gun is used for is suicide. And if you could try to commit suicide with a gun, 90% of the time, you will die. And 70% of people who survive a suicide attempt do not try again. So if you can just prevent a child in crisis or a person in crisis from having access to a gun in that moment, you would save a life. And that comes down to responsible gun ownership. And laws that support that.
Thank you. Mr. Brown?
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm a Marine, and in boot camp, with regard to your weapon, you got two options. One, you have it on you at all times. If someone happens to get it, there's consequences to pay. We don't have those same penalties out here in the civilian sector, and I would be a strong advocate, I am a strong advocate for ensuring that gun owners are held responsible for their weapon. And, because again, as Ms. Carlson stated, a lot of these are committed through stolen weapons, and then they're sold to the kids that are on the street. I know personally, growing up here, we had a lot of services that catered to a lot of the youth that were here. Like I said, I played soccer, did basketball down in downtown and other places. Those services have been taken away, and the city has to come back, our district has to come back and provide those services to our youth, in addition to the mental health services. The other aspect of it is when primarily Black and brown kids are graduating from schools here, they don't have any other options in terms of employment. So we set them up for just coming out of high school. We don't give them any alternatives. We've taken away the services that we previously had. They've come up on Grand Theft Auto, they've come up on drill music and easier access to guns, and we wonder how we got here because we presented this ourselves collectively, and we have to start turning those things back. And again, another aspect of gun prevention, National Institute of Health said our brains are developing up until 24, 25. I'm a strong proponent of raising that age until our brains are fully developed for you to have access to a gun. Again, it's not going to mitigate against the stolen ones. We do have to close that loophole from buying it legally and then going out and selling it on the street illegally. But those are just some options that I.
Thank you. Thanks for please. Moving to the 55th, Mr. Squire.
Well, I'd like to echo pretty much what everything that my colleagues at 54th said. And I'll tell you that as an emergency department nurse, the last year in Charlottesville has been worse than my previous 12 combined, including my time in the pediatric intensive care unit. I don't have any, obviously I gotta be circumspect about what I share, but I just don't have any words about what it's been like. I was on duty when the threat to Charlottesville High School came through, and our head doc had a kid there, and watching him have to plan for a mass casualty event at the same time, wondering if his daughter was even alive, right? Every time the alert goes off on my phone for Albemarle High School, it's happened twice this year. And you see it, it's that instant pang of like, as an emergency department nurse, like, what am I gonna have to do right now? And there's just so much that we can do, that we have to do. You look at Uvalde, Texas, you had 400, and I can't believe that's a real number, 400 heavily armed law enforcement officers waited outside of an elementary school and let fourth graders get massacred because of one person with an AR-15. Somebody tell me why AR-15s are legal, right? Because I don't understand. We need to expand red flag. I mean, it's common sense. You shouldn't have to applaud that. It's just, we need to expand red flag laws. We need to do everything that we can in the General Assembly. And I say that frequently, and I've had people be like, well, Governor Youngkin's just going to veto it. You know what? If he wants to veto the will of the people of the Commonwealth of Virginia, I'd like to see him try, right? And the bottom line, though, I want to make sure that we understand is that this is going to go beyond legislation. Just in the last 2 weeks, we've had, 4 or 5 people get shot and killed because they were at the wrong house, they were in the wrong driveway, they went to deliver food. I mean, there is a culture embedded in white supremacy and racism and misogyny that's being exuded on places like Fox News. And we have to go directly back and fight back against it, or things will never get better.
Thank you, Ms. Lawler.
Well, I mean, I am a parent too, and getting the messages and, and our kids, I mean, when we talk about mental health, imagine what our children are coping with. Not only the phone and all the social media, the terror that one of their classmates is going to kill them. I mean, this is just, we're really at a breaking point. I think it's exactly, I do feel like the violence with children is the hopelessness that they feel. And it's our job as adults to provide opportunities for them to feel that they have a future and that they can be successful. Obviously, I'm a big proponent of after school, investments, not only through the city and the county, but the schools. This is a great place for kids to find community and feel connected and have hope. In terms of guns themselves, we have to prosecute people that have their gun used in a crime. That has to start happening. If you have a gun and someone got it and used it for a crime, you need to be prosecuted. We also need to put more pressure on our manufacturers. They can be doing a lot more in terms of safety. I need to put in a code to get in my phone. Certainly the gun could have something like that too. We also need to raise the minimum age of when guns can be purchased. And red flag laws should be linked with the Violence Against Women Act because we know women are more likely to be assaulted or injured with the gun from an intimate partner. So I think that should also happen. Thank you.
Thank you all. This next round of questions will we'll start with the 55th. This is on,
Hey, Lewis.
last question. This is the last question. So, all right, then. This question has to do with the safety and health of our community, our Commonwealth, and our nation. It is, what can you do as a delegate to help Virginia and our nation, for that matter, tackle climate change? Ms. Walker.
Well, this is something I'm really excited about because I think I keep talking about farmers. Obviously, I grew up on farms, so they are the front line and they are the stewards of our environment. And a lot of times we see them as the enemy. And I think it's really important to understand a family farm. They're just trying to feed their family and they're trying to do it the best way they can. The modern practices that we are using right now really were to prevent starvation, okay? That's why we did these mega farms. We, tilled the soil too. Now we know better, okay? The soil is truly depleted. Most of our food has less nutrition than it used to have. There's a lot of practices like integrative farming, precision farming. I would love to work with the Farm Bureau to work on practices that are not only beneficial to the environment, but also can help a farmer have enough money to feed their family. And I would also say in terms of water, having ground cover is huge. There's so much there, and I could go on and on, but I would love to work on the Ag Committee actually and talk about these issues because we can improve outcomes not only with renewable energy, but with farmers.
Thank you. Mr. Squire, please.
Well, I think that, climate change, again, is one of the most existential things we're facing right now. We want our kids to have a planet they can actually live on and inhabit. And we need to be doing so much more for that, whether we're talking about, we finally got a solar farm, approved for Albemarle County. It's a great step in the right direction. We need to be going away from fossil fuel plants. And I love the energy in this area. We stopped fossil fuel pipelines from being built right in our backyards here, which is a great step in the right direction. We need to be pursuing things like, one of the things I love to do, I grew up, Amy and I, we actually both grew up on farms. It's really cute. Actually, it's Mount Calvary, right? It's 30 minutes from one other small world. But to be able to go and do like the farm subsidy money, I know it's a federal thing that we really have to tackle, right? But to bring that money back here so we can do local, like quarter acre, like small farms right here, you buy local. It takes all of those fossil fuels out of the supply chain, right? And it helps support local organic farms right here in our community. We need to be doing, one of the big things we need to do in Richmond is watch Virginia Beach. Most of Virginia Beach is in like a floodplain, right? That's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And what happens if we get one bad hurricane that comes ashore, right? Where are those people gonna go? That's things we need to pay attention to. Here in Albemarle and Charlottesville, 200,000 people are out of homes overnight. Where do they go and what's the impact on the rest of us? Those are very serious questions that we need to pay attention to and solve now before they become a problem.
Thank you. After placing 55th on that question, starting the 54th will be Ms. Collins.
Yes, so I think probably the number one priority is ending Dominion's monopoly on our energy production. The Clean Energy Act was a great step forward, restoring the SEC's regulatory ability to monitor our energy rates, so we're not overpaying, but more needs to be done. I can tell you on the school board, where I've been a pretty firm champion for environmental causes, we are often begging for scraps from Dominion. So even the environmental board steps we're taking, for example, we got electric school buses. It was a grant program through Dominion, and we were limited in how many we could get. Same goes for our power purchasing agreements that we formed. Albemarle has got a ton of them. We have a lot of solar panels on our schools, but every one of our wins was another division's loss because there was a limited amount that we were allowed to get as determined by Dominion and state legislators who were aligned with Dominion. So that needs to change. Speaking for the more urban district, I will not speak to farming, although I liked both of those answers. I will say investment in public transportation. I want to end on that one because for me, although I have a lot to say, I came prepared, but public transportation is tied to affordable housing. I grew up low income, and I know very well that if you are reliant on public housing, having transportation goes hand in hand to that, and it's kind of a, the environmental part of me doesn't want to say, kill two birds with one stone. I love birds, but it's something that both helps the environment and helps the community, and I would love to see more investments through VDOT in localities to promote public transportation and rail to help our community. And then, since I have just a few seconds, I'll just tick off a few things, supporting our state parks, making sure that we're not having low-income communities disproportionately feel the effects of our energy production, lots of things that I would like to see there.
So last month I attended the Environmental Virginia Symposium over in Lexington, where it brings together all environmental leaders across the Commonwealth. And there were a number of measures that were discussed there, increasing the solar production or availability throughout the Commonwealth, in addition to with regard to transportation and infrastructure, making sure that the carbon footprint it does not have as great of an impact there. And me personally, I've worked with our local energy assistance program here and was able to see some ways in which we could lower some of the costs that impacted some of the lower income families around our district. And I would like to have more of those opportunities available to our district.
Thank you. Mr. Norris.
I do think it is a major challenge for our community and for our Commonwealth and for our planet. And so I was very proud of the fact during my tenure as mayor, Charlottesville was on the map, was put on the map for being a hub of innovation around clean energy and energy efficiency. At the time, we launched an initiative to retrofit all of our city buildings, including all of our school buildings, to make them more energy efficient. We implemented a very innovative solar energy financing program, which resulted in the second largest privately owned solar panel array in the whole state of Virginia. I worked very closely with our General Assembly delegation to get some legislation passed around clean energy financing that ended up resulting in the creation of what we now know as Mr. Brown mentioned, the Local Energy Alliance Program, or LEAP. I was on the founding board of LEAP, which has now helped to weatherize and make more energy efficient thousands of homes and businesses here in our city and county. So we have a good track record. We've done a lot since then. That committee I mentioned earlier, the Citizens Committee on Environmental Sustainability, I was the founding chair of that committee. That's the committee that eventually morphed into what is now known as the Climate Action Planning Process for the city of Charlottesville, and has done some really commendable work. I completely agree with Ms. Carlson when it comes to linking alternative transportation, whether that's transit, bicycle, pedestrian. That's one way to certainly reduce our footprint. Affordable housing has to be front and center because the more we drive people out to outlying counties to find places they can afford to live, that's more miles they're putting on their cars and more pollution they're putting into our environment. We absolutely have to take on Dominion. It has outsized influence in our Commonwealth. This goes back to Mr. Squire's comment earlier about genuine campaign finance reform. It's not just about Dominion, it's about big donors across the board, using their influence to affect our politics and our decision making. So there's a lot we could be doing. And I would keep Virginia in the regional greenhouse gas emission.
Thank you. So that ends the questioning part. The last part of our board tonight will be a 1-minute summation or a final argument, if you will, from the candidates. I would say personal observations. Been a pleasure being with you tonight and doing this because I've really enjoyed the answers. Running for office is not an easy thing to do. It's a very hard thing. And you should be proud of all these individuals up here who have come up and answered these questions. None of them knew the questions in advance, and they all sounded like they've been studying those questions forever. So we will have a nominee out of these two groups. They deserve your support and they deserve your work. I hope you'll get out there and work for candidates in 54th, 55th. And having said that, we will start the summation with the 55th. Mr. Squire, 1 minute.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming out here tonight. It's really great to see so many people out here, and you really are. We talked about how under threat our democracy is, and it's true. And one of the best things we can do to fight back against that is to come for things like this, to be active and informed and involved in moving things forward. Listen, we're in for a tough year. The redistricting God smiled on our area, right? And so we're luckier here, and as districts aren't across the Commonwealth of Virginia. But we have to be willing to step off of our blue island here and go and be an example and make change and show around not just the Commonwealth of Virginia, but the country, what we can do here to evoke positive, progressive change. That we can run on these progressive values and ideals in every corner, not just of the Commonwealth of Virginia, but the country, every state, every county, every city across the United States of America. And we have to do that. We have to, because our democracy is in peril, and we have to save our rights for our kids.
Thank you, Mr. Squire. Ms. Walker, 1 minute, please.
I also want to say thank you guys so much for taking the time to attend tonight. And thank you again to the hosts. Right now we're working harder and harder and getting less and less, but that's because we don't have people working for us in Richmond. I spent nearly 20 years as a teacher, an advocate, community member, volunteer, and I want to take our community's concerns to the General Assembly because I know this is where the decisions are made. I hope you'll get involved in my campaign. I have a campaign manager and Dawson, the deputy manager, and Dan Lampman back there. Please go to my website, lawfordelegate.com. I want to remind everybody, Election Day is June 20th, and early voting actually starts next Friday, May 5th, which I cannot believe it's May already. And I'm humbly asking for your vote this June and also in November. Again, my name is Amy Lawfer. I'm running for House of Delegates because we need to do a lot of hard work, and I would love to do that with you. Thank you.
Thank you. That completes the 55th. We'll start off the 54th with Mr. Brown. 1 minute, please.
Yes, thank you all for coming out tonight. And again, I have a history of service here to our community as well as nationally. I believe that for serving the Marines, I believe that I bring all of that to bear, my business experience, my local government experience here. And I will continue to fight. And I think many of you know that I went through a pretty difficult time a few years ago. And I stood up and I did the right thing. And I will continue to stand up and do the right thing for our community. If you believe in our campaign, please go to BellamyBrownForDelegate.com. Please feel free to support, and I ask for your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Norris, 1 minute, please.
Well, thank you again. I appreciate all the questions. It was such a short time period. There's so many issues we didn't get into, and so I would love to have another chance to talk about some of the other really high priorities for our state, for our country. We need to talk about strengthening our democracy against the assault on our democratic values. We need to talk about economic opportunity. There's so many issues we could be addressing. But the tagline for my campaign is I'm a proven leader with a bold vision for positive progressive change. This district, the 54th district, is the second bluest in Virginia. And so we need to have a delegate from this district who is going to reflexively stand by workers, who's going to reflexively do the right thing when it comes to protecting choice. And going on the offensive for reproductive freedom, who's going to reflexively stand against the assault on the trans community, who's going to reflexively stand for the needs of people who suffer for lack of affordable housing, and reflexively stand for those families who are like my own, who've been devastated by the failures of the Virginia mental health system. There are so many challenges across the board. I have a track record of standing up and bringing people together to address these very kinds of challenges. I will be that kind of delegate if elected. Please vote for Dave Norris, and you can go to my website, votefordave.org. Thank you very much.
Ms. Collins, 1 minute, please.
Yes, so with all of my preparation, I never prepare the closing. I don't know why. So just speaking off the cuff, thank you so much for being here. It wasn't easy. It's nerve-wracking. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not really that we're at the end here. There are a host of other issues I would love to talk about. LGBTQ plus rights, I will also say there's work to be done there with family law, in particular around adoptions. My campaign, we are trying to make it more about people than me. We have knocked on thousands of doors. We've held dozens of meet and greets. No one has ever accused me of not working hard because I've had to work for everything that I've gotten. We would love your support, your help, and most of all, your vote. June 20th is the voting day. May 5th is early voting. And for those who have not done it in the past, all you need to do is go to your general registrar's office, and regular business hours are the last 3 Saturdays before the election. And whether you vote for me or not, I hope you vote.
Thank you so much. So we have Nancy Damon, who's from the city, here to finish up. And I would say that these things are put together by various volunteers who book the rooms, who make the little cards, who buy things and do all that. So let's get a round of applause for those people that put this together.
Yes, I am Nancy Damon. I'm vice chair of the Charlottesville City Party. I just think after listening to these really outstanding candidates, it's too bad we can't just vote for all of them. Want to thank the Jefferson School African American Heritage Center for hosting us tonight, and to say, they have a lot of fabulous programs. You should come to everything that they have here. And along those lines, I would like to ask you all, don't get up yet, but the candidates can stay around for a little bit, but if we could all move, don't rush the stage. We'll all move towards the back of the room because they're having play rehearsal and they need to come out on the stage. So, okay, got that. Okay, and then as you know, the city and the county help support people's campaigns, and the city's having a picnic on the lawn right here on June the 2nd. Hope you'll sign up, buy tickets, be a sponsor, come, and the county's fundraiser is May the 7th at Greencroft Club. You can talk to Karen and Madison and Teresa about details for that. And once again, thanks everybody. Yay!